Well, the Fish, Food and Allied Workers Union is warning about the possibility of a complete wipeout of communities in this province if the federal government doesn't stop LIFO. NTV's Jody Cook joins us live now with the latest on that story. Jody?
Lynn, there's fear this evening in the province's inshore shrimp fishing industry. Fear that that industry is near the end and the devastation of communities isn't far behind it.
The cost of that. You don't wipe out a community. People are not going to leave Fogo Island. They're not going to leave the Northern Peninsula. They're not going to just leave the
It's a grim prognosis from the FFAW. They're sounding the alarm and calling for all to attend protests Thursday across the province at the same time as a key meeting involving DFO on the decline in shrimp stocks in the north of Newfoundland and the south of Labrador. The FFAW says, first of all, do away with LIFO. Last in, first out.
Back in 2009, inshore harvesters had 131 million pounds of shrimp to harvest. Last year, we were down to about half at around 69 million pounds. And if we keep LIFO in place, with the cuts that we're looking at this year, it will be 14 million pounds. And that's not economically viable for any of the plants, any harvesters, and really speaks to the end of the inshore shrimp fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Science shows a large decline of shrimp stocks, which means a decline in quotas is coming. But the FFAW says with LIFO, the majority of quota cuts will be felt by the small inshore fishers, and big factory freezer trawlers won't feel nearly the hit. The FFAW says the impact will be devastating.
We can't be taken out of Area 6. We only have one area to fish. The offshore have 6 areas to fish. So if they cut us and use LIFO, we're gone out of the fish rate, and I don't think it's fair.
Even the Northern Peninsula, just to try to imagine the Northern Peninsula, take 4 shrimp plants off the Northern Peninsula, roughly 100, I don't know, it's unimaginable.
The freezer trawlers are represented by the Canadian Association of Prawn Producers. They argue the FFAW is pitting harvesters against each other.
This is not about just chasing profits for a few in terms of multinational corporations or whatever. You know, this is about communities, and now we make choices for our communities, and how are they going to survive? Rin talked about the Northern.
Also, the FFAW wants the factory freezer trawlers to get out of Area 6 for now and allow the inshore to be harvesting in that area. They hope that that will make it a more economically viable and sustainable future for the time being, and as well that it would preserve an industry which they call on the brink of collapse. Lynn?
Thank you very much. NTV's Jody Cook reporting live for us this evening.
Meanwhile, FFAW President Keith Sullivan gave his reaction today after the union lost a lawsuit levied by 71 scallop fishermen over a $2.6 million compensation fund. That money came from Nalcor in exchange for the closure of scallop grounds in the Strait of Belle Isle, where Muskrat Falls subsea transmission line is being laid. Under the original deal, the money was going to be paid to active scallop harvesters only, but Justice Carl Thompson ruled that the FFAW had failed to keep its members informed of how the negotiations were developing, even though the harvesters had signed over their negotiating rights to the union. Now, as a result, the union has to pay out the $2.6 million to all active and inactive scallop harvesters who held licenses in the area in 2013. Keith Sullivan says the union is reviewing that ruling now.
I just want to point out that it was a good deal for fish harvesters in this province, for an industrial user to come along, to recognise that there's impacts to fish harvesters and to talk about compensation and doing things like this. There have been too many incidents where harvesters have not received the same level of respect, and we think we did a very good job in that deal negotiation, and the judge actually acknowledged as much in the decision.
NDP leader Earle McCurdy is adding his voice to the debate over the $400 million CETA Fishery Fund. McCurdy wants the provincial government to take a firm stand on the money because the province is going to need it with a crisis looming in the shrimp industry. NTV's Michael Connors joins us live with more on that this evening. Michael?
Thank you very much, Lynn. The CETA Fishery Fund was a deal of the former PC government, but NDP leader Earle McCurdy had a stake in it too back when he was leader of the FFAW. He says that money needs to help the province transition to ground fish with trouble looming in the shrimp industry.
Here at the rooms this afternoon
Earle McCurdy was part of the province's announcement of the CETA Fishery Fund in 2013. The $400 million would help compensate the province for giving up minimum processing requirements as part of a trade deal with the European Union. $280 million of that money was supposed to come from the federal government. But the whole thing fell apart when the federal and provincial Tories disagreed on the terms of the deal. The new federal and provincial Liberal governments are now in negotiations again, but they're not giving many details.
Well, I think it's very clear, and I'm a bit concerned about the namby-pamby statements from both the federal and provincial Liberals, but I'd like to hear our provincial minister be clear and say that what we want is a fund to allow for fisheries renewal and development, because that was what was negotiated between the then federal and provincial governments. And I'm concerned that he's been so vague on it and doesn't appear to have any clear or strong objectives in mind.
The FFAW is warning of massive job losses in the shrimp industry if inshore shrimp quotas are cut. McCurdy says the money from the CETA Fishery Fund should be used to help the fishery transition back to a ground fish industry, with signs that shellfish are in decline.
I think Mother Nature is in the process of dictating that that's what we're going to be dealing with, and therefore what we have to do is say, how do we deal best with that? And product innovation, market development, quality enhancement, and so on. Those are critical pieces of managing that transition and making the best of it.
Now, McCurdy also wants the money from that fund to be spread out over 10 years instead of just 3 or 4 years. CETA could be implemented in 2017, so the province and Ottawa have until then to work out the details of the fishery fund. Lynn?
Thank you very much. NTV's Michael Connors reporting live.